Hello ladies, and welcome back to my channel. Today's tutorial is a little bit off topic from my normal Tichel tutorials, but I thought I'd make a sewing tutorial to show you how I've been creating the masks that I've been wearing in my videos. So this is a brand new kind of tutorial for me. So I went ahead and I got all my stuff ready. At least I think I've got everything, fingers crossed that everything is in front of me. I'm going to show you the pattern I've been using. I found this online. It's not my pattern. I modified it to fit better on my face because I don't have little tiny nose. My nose isn't very large, but it's not little and tiny. So I needed it to adjust it just a little bit for my face. But the basic, if you can see this is the basic pattern that I printed out. The pieces are approximately, when I laid, these are the pieces that I've cut out. I took this pattern, again, modified it for myself, made a few mock-ups in butcher paper, or what is this called? Parchment paper, and put it on my face, kind of silly Scotch tape and staples to make sure that it would fit best. I do recommend that, by the way. You won't, excuse me, you'll waste less fabric that way and be less frustrated. So once I got the measurements that I liked, I made up my pattern piece. This one's got lots of holes in it. I will probably make another one. If you happen to have pattern paper, which is not really paper, it's more of a cloth. I don't have any handy because I didn't think about this. That works too. It's like has a grid on it, some of it. You can use that, but have a pattern. Now I have the fashion fabric for the outside. I've already cut all of my fabrics because I didn't want this to be 8 bazillion hours long. But this is the shape, the outer fabric. I have an inner lining fabric. So this will go against on the inside against the fashion fabric, and you won't see this. And then I have the inner lining, which is, in this case, is black. I've marked out a seam allowance on this in crayon. I couldn't find, of all things, I couldn't find my white marking crayon or marking pencil, so I have a red one somewhere. I have a red one in my pile of stuff that I used to mark out the 1/4 inch seam allowance. To make it easier for you guys to see, on the fashion fabric, I went ahead and put a line of stitching in white on the white using my sewing machine. Now, I'm going to be doing this completely by hand because I realized not everybody has a sewing machine. I didn't realize that until I went to the store and all the sewing machines were sold out, and that's abnormal. You know, there's a rush on sewing machines right now, but so you will be able to do this one even if you don't have a sewing machine. You can see that sewing by hand, it works. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's helpful. Now, I've got my fashion fabric. I've also got a little piece of binding fabric. I didn't want to use, this is the last little teeny tiny bit of this really fun fabric, and I didn't want to use it all on this project. So I'm keeping this aside, but I found that I had a piece already cut. This is left over from the quilt I made my father-in-law several years ago. So I found that this really coordinated well. Is it matchy-matchy? No, but it coordinates well enough to make the outer binding for the sides. I have the cord that I'm going to be using. This is just something I would typically have thrown away, or most people would throw away. It's the size of a velvet with a little bit of stretch. I like this because, number one, waste not, want not. Number two, it holds better than some of the other things I was using. I'll pull this out. This is just a bit of ribbon. Um, and the elastic's been sold out around here for a very long time, so I couldn't get elastic. And it's also the strings, when you tie them in the back, you don't have the things behind your ears. I can't stand stuff behind my ears. So you could modify this to use elastics if you don't mind the stuff around your ears. I'm going to say I have my wax for waxing my thread. When I'm hand sewing, I always wax my thread. Helps it go through the fabric much easier. I'm trying to think about, I guess it's not mandatory, so this is just an optional thing. I got this one from Burnley and Trowbridge. It's a place, a little small business in near, I'm not gonna say it's in Colonial Williamsburg, but it's near Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. I have my thread. I typically like to match the thread to the fabric. But if you don't have a ton of money or a ton of stuff, black with dark fabrics, white with light fabrics seems to work the best. I guess historically that could have been a thing too, just dark and light. Now, some people are going to say to me, well, I don't have fabric in the house. I can't run out to get fabric. The fabric store is closed. The Walmart or some of the other suppliers are out of fabrics, but you do have fabric in the house. I'm going to use this as an example. This is an old pair of Hot Topic jeans that are my daughter's. They're worn out, stretched out, no good. Don't throw that stuff away. This is a really super, super soft denim. Makes for great face masks. Honestly, makes for great repurposing for everything. Old t-shirts work really great. On anything really, everything except for maybe boxers. I don't know, but we save a lot of old fabrics and old clothing here in the sewing room, so that I can repurpose them. So, just an idea if you have some old stuff laying around. Okay, I'm just thinking. If you're using a sewing machine, and I guess in the past couple of years, I realized that this is important. If you're going to sew with a sewing machine, cover your face. If you watch the documentaries on the sewing industry or on the fashion industry, all the ladies have face coverings on when they're using the machine because of the fabric particles coming up, and you breathe all that stuff in, and it's not really good for you. So hand sewing, I don't find that I have the same problem, so I'm not going to wear one, but it's important to cover your face with something to prevent breathing in all those fabric particles. Hope I'm not rambling too much for you. I have my sewing needles. I have two because during my sewing, I typically drop them. Or like this morning, I attached it to my sleeve and then I couldn't figure out where they were. So I'm going to say I have two of them in case I drop a needle or misplace a needle. And I don't want to stop the tutorial and go in with that. All right, now that we're 10 minutes in and I haven't started, I'm going to say also with the sewing, pick a comfortable spot to do it with lots of light. You don't want to strain your eyeballs. If you wear glasses, put them on. This chair, this happens to be the best place in my house right now with lighting wise to do this tutorial. So I'm a bit uncomfortable with this chair. This chair is weird. It's a dining room chair. But put your feet up. I have my friend Percival Penguin. He's got my back. He's gonna sit behind me and cushion my back while I'm doing this. All right, so let's get started with the actual sewing now that I've gone through all of that. I am going to take my outside fashion fabric and the fabric for, let's see, we're going to switch you. Okay. All right. And the fabric for the inner lining, I'm going to pin them together, making sure that the outside is out. This one has a really cool wax coating on the outside. It's a really fun and easy fabric, but I'm going to take the lining, the inner lining, and I'm going to pin it. That was the one thing I forgot to tell you, pins. You don't have to use a million of them, just enough to hold it in place. Yeah. I'm lining up, I'm starting in the center front, like so. And I'm just going to pin this around. Now feel free to fast forward. I know this is going to be a very, very long tutorial because hand sewing, and I'm not the best at editing. I try not to edit so much. Okay. All right. So I'm going to use one more pin. I'm not bothering to pin in the back here. It's just not necessary because I'm not gonna worry about that too much. But this is what you want to get for both pieces of the outer fabric and the inner lining. So we're going to do the same thing with this guy. Pin. I would typically be doing this flat, but I don't know how to get the camera facing down onto the table. I'm recording with my tablet, so haven't figured that out yet. But for those of you interested, I will be filming a tutorial for a headscarf later. It's one I did. It's been on the list since last week to do the tutorial, and I kept getting distracted by Ooh Shiny, so I haven't made it yet. But as you can see, the second piece. Now, I'm not going to do any stitching yet, because I will show you I made a mistake. Pay attention to what I'm doing. Otherwise, these two go together like so. No, nope, I pinned it to the wrong side because I wasn't paying attention. Okay, take the pins out, do it again. Okay. Pin. Once I get the two pieces connected in the center, I'll show you, I'll talk about it while doing it. I will, once I get these pieces done, I will be addressing the sides. So just bear with me, please. Okay. Not used to having to talk while doing this process. This is kind of meditative for me. I typically sit in the chair, listen to some music or the ramblings on of something on the YouTube or the television, like so. Okay, now I'm going to take these two pieces. You can, and I probably should, but I don't, baste around the outside of each piece to hold both fabrics in place. I'm lazy. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to take the two pieces and I'm going to line up the edges at the front and I'm going to pin them using the pins that are already in. So that should be plenty of pins, like so. Now, typically I would take this over to the sewing machine and run the 1/4 inch seam straight down the center with, using the machine. But I'm going to do this one by hand just to show you guys how that works. Okay, so I've got my thread. Run a little wax onto it. Okay. Okay, now, the way I learned, and I don't do it anymore, is to roll the ends, to make a little knot. Not going to bother. Not going to do that. That is not the way we do things. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this much nicer. I'm going to get the thread stuck on my hands. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I stopped just and left a little edge. I'm going to go back down through. And then once I get I have a little loop, I'm going to run the needle through the loop and pull. And in a perfect world, this makes a nice little knot and it holds the thread in place. So, all right, well, this is a sewing your mask tutorial, not a sewing tutorial. So I hope you ladies know a little bit about hand stitching. I'm going to do a back stitch all the way across. And pull the pins as I go along so that the thread does not get caught up on the heads of the pins. I think you could probably also do a running back stitch, but just want to make sure that this is going to hold. And there are a bunch of different historical stitches you could do that would make this a little bit easier. I can't think of them right now, and I honestly don't know how to demonstrate them for you. So this, I'm hoping that most of you know from running stitch and a back stitch and the running back stitch. Also, having a good light source is mandatory. I have a ring light above me. one of these days, this is kind of fun, but a random topic since I'm sewing and tutorialing. It's a weird word. Um, it's sewing and making a tutorial. One of these days, I am going to get my sewing slash YouTube room slash dressing room, I guess multi-purpose room. In here in the house, we call it at least I do call it the peacock room because it's painted all peacocky shades. I'm gonna get that finished, and then I will be able to have better lighting upstairs, and I will be able to film the tutorials up there with a camera and all that stuff instead of relying on what I'm doing now. So maybe after all this stuff is done with the COVID-19. Just so you know, this is so much fun. It's getting caught because I'm filming. It's getting caught on all these pins. It's life. The thread is getting caught on all the pins. So. Okay. So probably cut the thread a little too long, but it's okay. Almost to the end. And if I've done a decent job, it will hold together. Okay. And grab some tea. So I originally thought I'd make another cup of coffee, and then I was like, no, I've already had 2 cups of coffee. I will be levitating. It's too much caffeine. So I made myself a dandelion and lemon balm tea. Okay, so I got to the end. I'm going to open this up, and you see we have the shape. Now, put this to my face, and this is the shape I like. Now, keep in mind it's got the 1/4 inches around all the way around that are for the seam allowance, so it's going to be a little bit high and a little bit down too far here. But the inside looks like so. What I do at this point, because I am obsessive and I do this by hand with every single one of the masks that I make, is I fold this seam allowance down. I would typically give it a good pressing with the iron and then move on to the next step, coming back later and giving this a stitch down, because I want to make sure it doesn't bunch up and create that big huge ridge down the center after washing. But for today, I'm just going to do a quick whip stitch all the way up and down just to keep it in place only going through the back or the interlining layer. You could also, if you wanted, do a stitch where you turn the fabric right side out and you do a little teeny tiny stitch with on the outside, so it's invisible on the outside, but it's got the long stitch running on the inside. I'm going to just do the whip stitch because I like that stitch, and I think it'll work best for my purposes. This again is optional because this is not going to be seen at all. And if you're really good with the iron, you can iron out that ridge if it develops. And just whip stitching. Once I get this complete, I am going to fold over the seam allowance and baste it down. I find that's helpful. Now, you can totally do all of this with a sewing machine. So if you're saying, Olivia, I've got a sewing machine, I am not sitting here and doing this by hand. You can do all of this by sewing machine. So okay. Okie. One more stitch on this side, and then I'm going to go down the other side. And then I'll show you what it looks like. Again, typically I would iron this. My iron's in the kitchen, which is behind me. I'm not getting up and going in the kitchen right this minute. I do highly recommend using the iron though for pressing out. I think that's the thing with sewing. Sewing is 90% ironing and 10% actually sewing. It's interesting. Okay. My daughter may come down at some point during this video. She's upstairs taking her online chemistry class, I believe, this morning. It's either chemistry or math. I can't remember. So I know she took a test this morning. I had to make sure she was awake for that. And she did pretty darn good. But okay. Oops. Okay, almost to the edge. Trying to remember to hold it up high enough for you guys to see what I'm doing with the sewing. Okay, this is the last whip stitch. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the inside. and then I'm going to flip it over and on the outside. Now on this one, I see a line of stitching for where I marked out the seam allowance. I'm sometimes imperfect with the sewing machine. It gets away from me a little bit. So if I were sewing it normally, that would not be there at all. I will just pick that out with the seam ripper. Won't be an issue. But now I'm going to find out where my thread is. Okay, so now I'm going to stick my thread and needle into the fabric, and I'm going to take and fold over the seam allowance. So you'll see right there, I'm going to just fold it in and pin. Now, had I basted this, I wouldn't have to do the pinning part. I could just fold it in. But since I didn't, I am going to have to use the pins. So either way, you end up spending the time. It just whether you wanted to spend the time before or after. So what we have, the entire mask will be folded over. You can see the seam allowance here. I put the pins in sideways, not down. It's just, this worked for this. Sideways works best when you're, at least for me, when you're doing the rolling over. And I try to have all the heads pointing in the same direction. So when I'm sewing, I don't accidentally stab myself coming up on a pin. I know which way the points are. So it's not a surprise. Okay. Same thing up top. Now, if I'm not worried about this part, comes up to a little bit of a V. I'm not worried about it being too bulky at the top. If we're turning corners and there's a lot of different sewing techniques, but for this purpose, it's okay to not fuss with it too much. If you're an avid sewer, and then take your time and turn the corner, turn the edge the way you like it. But this is just the way that works for me. Okay. Now. Okay, last pin, and then this is the outside, like this, and then this is the inside. Okay, I'm going to run the stitching around here using that really, really fun invisible stitch that I was telling you about earlier. I do not remember the name of it. I'm not really big on proper names. I just know the stitch to use. Probably why I'm not the best person to do sewing tutorials, but anyway. Bring the thread up through to the front, and then I'm going to, okay. I want to sew with the points away from me because I do not want to stab myself. I'm going to take a little teeny tiny stitch behind. I'm going to stick the needle in behind and come up a little into on I came up in the center, but I will show it to you as best I can, this stitch. But it's just to tack it in place. You can do a basting stitch, but I like to leave this in. Do a stitch that I can leave in, it's no issue. Okay, so you can see there's a really long stitch in the back here, and then on the front you really only see a little pin prick, and that's it. So I'm gonna hopefully quickly get this one all the way around. Again, they don't have to do really small stitches. For this, it's just to hold the seam allowance in. That's it. If you want to use a different method, feel free. This is just the way I'm doing mine. I think you probably could get away with having the sewing together the inner line, sewing together the lining, putting the right sides together, flipping it inside out. It totally could do that with the sewing machine. This is just what I've been doing. So I'm a little bit of a neat Nick when it comes to the sewing. Okay. All right. Oops. Let's not drop. Okay, so that's the first part. And show you the back. That's the first bit. Now I just have 3 more parts to do, and I will be on my way to being finished. I'm just doing a quick stitch across the side. And repeating what I just did all the way across. Now there will be one way that feels normal for you and another when you're sewing, and the opposite direction feels a little odd. It's just part of it. Okay. Trying to think of weird things. I'm trying to think of stuff to talk about, and the only thing that comes to mind is weird stuff. So and let's see, did I get a knot in it? I did. No big deal. Okay. I do that sometimes too. figure out what I did wrong. Ah, I see it. Okay, my friend. Okay. Another one of those oddball things. Don't be discouraged if you get knots in your thread. They can come out. No. There we go. Okay, once I get to the center here, I'm going to switch out thread and continue. I think I'll tell you how I came across this fabric. I think I'll just chitty chat about that for a little bit. I was at my local thrift shop. I love going just to find new things, new to me things. Thrift shop shopping is something I've done for a very long time, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. But anyway, I went in and I think I was looking for probably some china or something for my decorative bits here. And I saw this fantastic, oh my gosh, dress. It was hanging up. It's absolutely stunning. And I said, I must have that. I must have that. And I went over and I picked it up and realized that, oh my gosh, it is about 12 sizes too big for me. And I went, okay. So I just grabbed it, and it was, I'm gonna say $7.50, but it was a huge amount of fabric, and I was delighted, absolutely delighted. So when I brought it home, I turned it into, instead of just sizing it down or whatever, excuse me for a second, I turned it into an 18th century style short dress. And yes, they have a name, and no, at this precise moment, I do not know what it is. But I had the pattern, and I said, huh. So anyway, that's what I did. I turned it into that, and then I made a cute little pinner cap to go with it. And then I still had extra bits left over to just not big enough to do anything a really large project with, but just enough to do something like this. So I've posted pictures of the jacket. I call it a jacket. It's a dress, but the first time I wore it, I got so many compliments on that jacket. I love it. It's upstairs hanging in a closet. I think I might model this one with that, and then figure out a really cool headscarf to go with it. I wish there were more of the fabric so that I could make a matching headscarf, because I am not modeling the pinner cap because I am not styling my hair. Just not doing it. I brush it and I put it into a swirly bun underneath of my wraps. When it comes out, I put it into a braid, and that's pretty much it. So I just don't feel like doing all the pinning and stuff for an 18th century type of hairstyle for that. So, but I'm sure I have fabrics or scarves upstairs that would look really good with this. So, I'm starting the new thread. Loop. Okay. Going up through to the top, pulling, getting rid of the pin. Okay. Also think going back to the not editing, I also think you should see how long it actually takes to make one of these guys. I've done ones that are embroidered, which take a whole lot longer. So my favorite one is the one that has the dandelions embroidered on it. And I made one for somebody, and the embroidery itself took 12 hours. So I underestimated somebody asked me how long it took me to make mine, and I underestimated by a little bit. So when I did the second one, I timed it better, and I was like, wow, just 12 hours for the embroidery. But it's pretty intricate. Some of them I'm doing with some pretty net lace. The cottons are fun. Okay, almost. But pretty much anything works. Okay. Okay, so I've got to the end. Doing the same thing across. And then I'll show you back and front. There we go. Okay. I'm not, again, with the end, I don't care how big the stitches are. It's not there to hold anything together. It's just there to get the thread from the one side to the other. I don't like to stop and start, stop and start. Seems like I'd waste the same amount of thread snipping it off, tying off the end over here, snipping it off, and then restarting over here as it just run across. So just a thought. All right, this is the last bit. And then this will be, the seam allowance will be tacked down. And I am already 50 minutes into this video. So take out 10 minutes for the introduction, and you're pretty much at the time allowance, the time that it takes me to get to this point. All right, so okay, a few more stitches, and then I'll show you where we are to get this pin. That's the last pin. And actually have to get out of my morning gown. Morning, M-O-R-N-I-N-G, like it's the morning, not morning like M-O-U-R-I-N-G, like somebody died. My morning dress and morning wrap, and actually get dressed and do stuff at some point today. Okay, so to this point, I don't know how any of you feel, but I just, there, on the days that I don't have to right away get dressed, I don't bother. Makeup, but I'm going to be filming a tutorial, a headscarf tutorial later, so I'm actually going to have to put on some makeup and do a real outfit. So this is the inside with the seam allowance folded in and tacked in place. This is the bottom. Okay, now the outside. When we put it on our faces, I'm going to be careful not to stab myself with a needle. This is what we have. I don't have anything to put the clip here. One of my Facebook friends suggested using the three-prong folders, have those little metal clips in them, snipping those out and using those here in your mask. I don't have any three-prong folders. I haven't had those in a while. And I mean, I'm sure I could tear apart the storage area under the steps and look for the kids' old stuff, but I don't have that much energy. I don't really want it that badly. And I honestly don't want the clips enough that I would buy the folders. It would be one more trip out of the house that I just don't feel like it. All right, so another reason having two needles comes in handy. I'm going to take this, it's needle threaded, and I'm going to set it aside because that part is done. And I'm going to take the lining piece and I'm going to pin it together. But first I want to show you on the one side, I folded over the seam allowance and then I folded that under. I tucked under again. So this is the edge of the fabric, rolled it twice in and pressed it so that I will have access when I put this inside of the mask like so. There will be an access space to put in a filter. I have a couple of the activated charcoal filters. I don't remember what they're called, but they have numbers on them and they're the ones that are recommended by everybody. But I have a very limited number of those, and for a while I haven't been able to get them. Maybe they're restocking them now, I'm not sure. But I've been using coffee filters inside because I have a ton of coffee filters and they are really cheap. And I just pull them out and toss them in the trash can. It's really, really, I think it's better, but that's just me. Personal preference. Personal preference. Okay, so. Okay. I am going to, yeah, that's the way it goes. Okay. Now when I cut this, I think I cut it a little too big. So I'm going to do a little trim and see how we have that. See, I'm not perfect, honestly. I guess I'm the first person to admit that. I am so not perfect. I make mistakes and then I have to fix them in mid-project. So if you have the same problem, no worries. You're absolutely normal. Okay, snip that off. On this top edge, the fabric must have moved while I was cutting it out and I had this extra little bit at the top. Stuff happens. I just figured I'd fix it now instead of waiting and having it be a problem. So I'm gonna pin. And this is the center seam. We're gonna do the center seam again. And then we will attach the inner and the outer. And have a mask. Well, an almost mask. Okay, more thread. Now, I am going to cut this one slightly shorter so that I don't have so much laying about. Okay. That's weird. Makes a weird noise. But by doing this, it pushes the wax into the thread. It's supposed to make it easier to go through. Found the biggest thing is having it waxed to the edge. It helps me thread the needle better without wetting it or anything else like that. It's just much easier to get through the hole. Which is random, just a random thought while I adjust Percival. I noticed when I'm threading the needles, I don't even pay attention. I don't see the actual hole in the needle. I just kind of stick it in. When it goes through, it goes through. It's rather just random, something odd, but yeah, I never noticed that. I just don't see the hole. I just somehow push it through. It just goes through. Okay, starting again. Here's my loop. Here's my loop. Okay. Now this one, I think I might just do a running back stitch because this doesn't really matter. It's not going to be straining, you know. The outside fabric, I think, has a lot of tension on it. So that center seam has to be a little bit stronger. But this one, not so much. It's just there to line the mask. Okay. Oops, ouch. I'm gonna stab myself with the pin because that's a fun idea. Again, if you have the sewing machine, this is much faster using it, but it's not so horrible, even hand sewing. Now, I forgot to go and tack down or sew that little access piece. I'll do that as soon as we're done with this. Okay, almost done. Almost. A few more stitches. Okay, last stitch, and then I'm going to tie off here. It's probably overkill, but don't want it to come undone. Now, I do have 2 size scissors here, and I always seem to grab these. These are too big for for the needlework. These are my sewing, cutting the fabric out scissors. I should put them away. But I've got these cute little embroidery scissors that I should be using for this, and I keep grabbing the wrong ones. Anyway, I'm going to do a quick sewing of this just to keep it from being a mess. I don't want it to come unfolded. Even though you won't see it, I'll know it. I can't be the only one that thinks that way. Nobody else will see it, but I'll know it's not neat. I'll know it's come undone and be unhappy. Okay. Let's see. There's some of the random things that come into my mind when I'm sewing. What I'm going to make for dinner tonight. We had Mexican food last night. Seemed like the thing to do. Tonight, I want to make a roast chicken. Probably do it with barbecue, like a barbecue roast chicken. I have cauliflower, so I'll probably do a cauliflower smash instead of mashed potatoes. For some reason, I like it a lot, and Alyssa does too. So we'll do that. Maybe make some corn muffins. This seems silly, but that's the kind of stuff that when I'm sitting here sewing and it's kind of meditative, I can think about the other random stuff that I need to do during the day. Plotting and planning dinner, which I've cooked way more meals in the quarantine time than I have in years. Oh my goodness. So when I'm by myself, typically Mondays and Wednesdays in the evenings, I would just have like a bowl of cereal or something because I'm just by myself typically. Alyssa would be at school, David at work. So I'm not going to make a huge meal just for myself. So, but with everybody home, I've been cooking lots and lots of meals. Okay, now in here I am not going to do the same thing I did on the outside with the pressing open and stitching down. I'm just going to press it all to one side. And I'm going to do the same stitch I just did with the little teeny tiny, it's like an invisible stitch. And the long stitch on the back. So you don't even have to do this. This is not a mandatory part. Again, this is just me being obsessive. And then I will be putting this together with the outer piece, giving them a good sew. I think this is the project telling me to hurry it up. You could even sew this down with the sewing machine if you have one. There we go. Sorry for the funny faces. I actually do make them when I'm sewing, and I don't always recognize that I'm doing it. So please don't poke too much fun. It's one of those odd things that I don't even think about. Again, fast forward at any point if you'd like. But other thoughts that came to my mind about fabrics and stuff. I went over the t-shirts, the old jeans. My favorite are the one again from the Hot Topic. They're because they're the soft with the stretch. But I was thinking, we have these for those of us who wrap, we have scarves laying around. Yes, they do eventually wear out. Yes, they get stained. We're cleaning and we spray by accident, and we get bleach on them. So many things can happen just from everyday wear and tear. Can make the face masks from headscarves as well. Those work. It's kind of cool. So some of my old scarves, and especially the t-shirt ones, end up as rags. So I haven't had the problem of running out of paper towels because I haven't purchased paper towels in a very long time. The David's old undershirts, the white undershirts, they get cut up into between 4 and 6 pieces, and I use those on all my surfaces. But the t-shirt tickles become scrub rags. Anything. Old washcloth. I love to take the washcloths because washcloths don't last forever. They get kind of grungy looking. I use those as the older ones as cleaning things because they're not bad. They just are ugly. I don't want to have company come over and we're not having company right now. Nobody's having company, but I don't want them to come over and use the funky, weird looking washcloths. So, okay. Now that I've got both pieces and I've rambled on about nonsense, I'm going to make sure my thread is coming out. You can see just along the edge here, I'm making sure that the needle and thread come out right in the edge, right at the edge there. And I'm just going to attach it on the outside. If you don't have thread, you don't have to worry about figuring out if you ran out of thread, you don't have to figure out where you cut it. You don't have to figure out that part. Again, I'm just lazy. I don't want to have to recut. Now, I have this piece and I have this piece. I'm going to make sure I have the top at the top, the bottom at the bottom, and lay it in, matching the seams. Okay, now, once I get it to this point, I am going to fold in the seam allowance for my friend. And I'm going to put a couple of pins right there and one on the opposite side. And it just looks like this. I'm going to do that all the way around and then sew it. And if you can hear my stomach growling, I'm hungry. It's lunchtime, but I can wait. So I apologize for growly and grumbly tummy. I had bullseye eggs for breakfast this morning. So, and for those of you who don't know what those are, it's where you take a slice of bread and cut the center out with a cookie cutter. And then when you fry it, you crack the egg right into the center of your bread on the skillet, and it cooks the egg in the center. And then you have a toast round to dip in the yolk if you like runny eggs. I typically do not. I cook mine more so they're almost completely cooked through. that. Now doing the other side. Now, this side will be shorter. Now, see, this will be shorter. Don't panic. Do not adjust to the, to the very edge. You don't want that. Figured I'd say that. So when I'm pinning it, I will show you where it ends, because that's your access point for adding in a filter. If you're not planning to add in a filter and you just wanted to do 4 layers of fabric, because I think it's 4 or 5 is the recommended layers of cotton if you're making a cotton mask. But I do 3, makes it a little bit easier to stitch and add a coffee filter. I'm also not sure what the recommendation is as far as how many times you wear a cotton mask. I have a whole basket of them, and they're up here in the kitchen. And just on my way out, I grab a mask out of the basket and I put it on in the foyer before I go out. And then when I come back in the house, it comes off and goes onto a table with the used masks. It's the used masks table. And I have a hand sanitizer down there on that table. So it's they get worn one time, they go right in a pile. I leave them sit for a few days, and then I take them up and wash them. That's my process. Everybody has their own process for how to deal with them. But I'm thinking that you should probably have a couple masks, at least a couple, probably a little bit more if you can. Make 3. 3 is a good number. Okay. Here we go. Almost around, and I'll show you with the pinning, and I'll show you what it looks like. You're at 1 hour and 13 minutes. Not so bad. Probably the longest tutorial I've ever made, but we are not too shabby. Now, when I'm attaching thinking about this too, while I'm attaching the inside, I typically do that by hand anyway. And it's with that same weird invisible stitch. You can whip stitch, you can do anything you like, running stitch, running back stitch, you can do anything you like. So on the sewing machine, but I do that weird invisible stitch and it holds in really well. I do smaller stitches than if I were just tacking something down, but it seems to hold really well. It gives good shape. And this is what it looks like. You can see on the edge, there's the bottom. And I'm going to just tack that down. After I untie my thread, because I just tied it in a knot. Okie dokie, artichoke. Okay. Knot out. And then I'm going to, there we go. All right, quick sew. Hopefully I don't get caught too many times on the pins. And I'm not going all the way through to the front. I'm just going through the first couple of layers. If you're smarter, cut the thread shorter so it's not all in everything. one more time. It gets caught on the pin of a head, the head of a pin. Okay. There we go. Almost to the edge. And I'm doing the same thing when I get to the edge of going across the side. Just to get over to the other portion, I want to make the invisible stitch. Okay, almost there. Okay, now I'm going to go across the top. And let's see. Now I went out this morning in the garden and plucked some dandelions, some dandelion flowers and some dandelion leaves, and the lemon balm for my tea. It is a bit rainy, so I only got a few of the dandelions, and they were closed up, but I'm just making tea, it doesn't matter. I tried to leave some out this week for the bees. Bees love the dandelions. So I harvest them and freeze the petals and make a dandelion mead from them. I have a jug of that going right now in the primary. We're getting ready to switch that over to a carboy and let it age. Do its secondary fermentation, and I bulk age it in the carboy. So for those of you who do not know, that's a very large jug. It's picture the Brita water cooler jugs, only clear and glass. It can be plastic too, but that's what a carboy is. But I have that's what I do every other week. I harvest the dandelions from out front because of course I grow them. I think they're fantastic. I plucked out all the ones out back in the garden from last year, and I am drying out the roots and the leaves to keep for winter. And then the ones out front, I leave them on the off weeks for the bees. So I harvest dandelions week 1. I rip the petals off of, and of course I don't harvest every single one. You got to leave a certain amount out there anyway. But I take out the petals, put them in a container, and freeze them. Otherwise, they just go to seed. Because that's the kind of cool thing about the dandelions is they continue through the process, and you end up with seeds if you don't freeze the heads. Just random. I'm sure there's a better way to preserve them. I haven't figured it out yet. I don't have a dehydrator, one of those things to make jerky and the dried fruits. So And I found that if you keep them in the tighter containers, they don't get all frostbitten and freezer tasting. Okay, almost to the edge, almost done the top completely. So, yep. This year is the dandelion mead methglin, METHGLIN. Maybe there's another E in there somewhere. I tend to add extra vowels, so I don't know, when I'm making spellings, I add too many vowels sometimes. But this year is the dandelion. Next year will be lavender. We trade off every year. I have the lavender is already from last year, is already in its carboy and is aging. I'll just leave it alone until probably end of July, early August, and then I'll add in the color and then bottle it. Hoping we'll be using that for the wedding in September. My father-in-law loves the lavender wine, so we're using that for his wedding. Fingers crossed it's going to go off without a hitch. Okay, I need new thread. This won't make it across. So I'm going to replace that. Do I have the one? Yeah, I have the one that I cut off before. And I will just use that one right here. Okay. Again, sorry for the randomness of my talking. Just things that come to mind. Still not used to having to chit chat while doing the sewing, except inside of my head. With the constant stream of randomness going on in there. Which makes me sound completely insane. Why I said that, but I think it's a thing about being a mom. Always trying to keep ahead of the youngins. Trying to plot and plan the next step. Even while you're doing something with your hands. And I just realized I said youngins. Okay. All right, we're almost done. And then I'll show you what this looks like. Then there'll be 2 more steps and we'll be done. Even better if I don't pull the thread out of the needle. Okay. So here we go. Hour and a half, just about. I think if I can get this in under 2 hours, that would be really great. And I'm sure you would be thankful. Again, with the tying off overkill. Snippety, snippety. Okay. So over there. All right, so this is what we have so far. The main body of our mask goes like so. It's nicely fitted. Again, if you have the pieces to put in, you could make a little channel in the top, and while it's open, you can stuff it in. That's all up to you. I don't have them, so I'm not. And here is our excess right here. Yes, it looks small, but you can fit in there. I handed it to my daughter, one of the first ones, and said, here, put the filter in, and she managed to get it in. Took her a couple minutes, but she did it. So that's what we have. Now it's time to put on our binding, and it also forms a channel for our strings. Now I'm going to take my friend, and this is really cool because another kind of cheat for me, this has 1/4 inch stripes. So these red and purple chevron pieces are 1/4 inch. So I don't have to measure, I don't have to mark. It is what it is. It is perfect. Now, placing this right side to right side on the side of the mask. I'm going to hold it up. You could be all fancy schmancy and do numbers and measure and all that stuff. I don't have time for that. It's too much effort. Laid it across. Eyeballed a little bit extra on this side to fold in. And then I'm going to cut it. Again, this fabric makes it really simple to cut a straight. I just cut straight across the tips of the chevrons, straight across in the row. Now I'm going to take this one because the sides are exactly the same. Right there, they're exactly the same. I'm just going to take piece 1, lay it on top of the others, and cut the second piece the exact same. So it works. Now I do cut each of these for each mask individually. I don't just cut a stack of these and then put them on, because I want to make sure that the sides come out appropriately. I think the first couple, the fabric stretched a little bit, depending on what fabric you're using. The first couple I used, put my feet down a second, were stretchier material. The t-shirt material will stretch a bit, so the side pieces were too small. So it's just easier if you do this. You do the measurement for each mask. So I'm placing it on so that it overhangs on both sides, approximately even. I'm not being obsessive about it. I'm not overthinking it. You shouldn't either. It's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science. Okay. All right, now I'm going to take this piece, fold it over. So we have like this. And I'm going to put a pin. And there's method to this madness. I do this the same with if I were sewing it on the sewing machine. Fold it, take this, fold it over. And pin it. Okay, so I have this and this. I'm going to lay this down. I'm going to cut some more thread. Use the correct scissors. Okay. And yes, I did have to have those there so that I make sure I have the correct ones to cut the fabric as needed. So it was suggested that I put those away, and I don't need to have those next to me, but yeah, I do. I'd rather look silly grabbing the wrong ones than not have what I need and have to get up and run all over the place. Okay, so there we go. Now I'm going to be sewing. It's sewing time. Okay. Now, actually catch the loop this time, silly. Okay. Now, this one's a little tougher. If you have a thimble, that really helps. I, for some reason, cannot find any thimbles. Not that I wear them often, because for some reason it just, I guess you get stuck in your ways. I found it really hard to wear the thimble. It's probably why I can't find any of them. I remember sewing my father-in-law's quilt, and I actually had little holes. You could tell I was sewing because I had the holes and the skin. It kind of like puckered and started peeling off. It was rather unsightly, but I just couldn't get it to work for me. The whole idea of the thimble. So I probably have 6 of them. I can't find them. And honestly, if you have a trick for using them, let me know. I'm doing the back stitch here because I want this extra secure. I'll say all the words. Okay. Now, this is even more random. I became really comfortable with hand stitching when I was making my 18th century wardrobe. It's kind of cool. I joined this really neat club on Facebook, and it was a page. It was kind of like a sew along page, kind of. It's historical sew fortnightly, I think it was. Anyway, you do 12 projects in the year, and I decided that I needed an 18th century wardrobe, and I needed to do it as historically accurate as possible. So guess what? I started stitching by hand, and I got pretty darn good by the end of the outfits, because you can think of all those seams. It's not like they didn't wear a lot of clothing. All those seams by hand, I got really comfortable with the hand sewing, even more so than with a sewing machine. So it's kind of cool. Okay. Now I'm going to open this up. And I'm pressing the edges over. So I'm just using my fingernails and pressing that to kind of give it a crisper crease. If you feel like getting up and ironing it, you can iron it too. Now, I'm running the thread back to the corner over here. I'm folding over the 1/4 inch seam allowance like so. And then I'm going to fold it down to the base here. And give it a pin. And I'm going to do that on the other side too. think I only used 2 pins, and then I'll show you what it looks like with just the pins, and then I'll quick stitch and move on to the other side. Okay, so it looks like this. Outside, inside. I'm just going to do a quick whip stitch on this inside. Making sure to go through the layers of binding, but not all the way to the front, if that makes sense. You don't want to see these stitches on the outside. Okay, quick. You don't have to be insane. Allergies today. Don't worry, no extra issues here, no sicknesses, just I have a whole bunch of plants in the kitchen and blooming, and the allergies are killing me. I took an allergy pill, but doesn't cure all. Okay, almost to the edge. I just realized there was the one thing that I don't think I brought over, a safety pin. I used the safety pin to thread the cords through the channel. And this won't go up and get cleaned and okay. Tie this off on this side, and I'll show it to you before I move on to the other side. Okay, so we have one channel here. This is the inside with the opening. You can see that there. And then that's the outside. That's where the cord, again, where the cord's going to go through. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. And see if we can't do this a little quicker. And I just found, surprise safety pin. So yay, I didn't forget it. There we go. Okay, fold over. I'm going to cheat. I'm not using the pin here because I don't have to right this minute. I did that for your benefit, to be able to show it to you the last time. Okay. Okay. Loop. All right. Now we are going to sew the 1/4 inch seam here. The edge is the hardest part. Also, you pick a fabric that has a nifty print. It can give you a stitch guide. These chevrons are the width of my stitches. It's kind of a handy dandy cheat. Be kind of cool if I could have the camera just shooting right here. I'm gonna have to figure out if that's possible, how to do that. There's got to be some way to set that up so that you're just seeing my sewing hands and not me. Okay. All right, fold the other edge over. And there we go. Get that in place. Now remember, I'm not tying it off. I'm just going around a couple times to make sure that it's locked in place. And I'm breaking the thread. That's the danger of having the thread so long, is when you're pulling it through, it can snap. That wasn't bad because I had gone through that several times, so it's going to lock it in place. Just one of those oddball things that can happen. Okay. So I'm going to repeat. And before this gets worn, I'm going to go through and pull out the stitches that I can see from the machine. When I showed how to set up to show you guys the seam allowance, it was much easier to see the white on the camera than it was to see that red color that I had access to. Okay. All right, my friend. Again, correct side, inside. And we're gonna go, and my Percival slipped. Sit up a little straighter. Okay, now I'm gonna go in and stitch this last bit. This is the last bit of stitching, and then we can just put the ties through the channels. Okay, that's it. All right, quick whip stitches. And 1 minute 45. 1 minute, 1 hour 45 minutes is what we're at right now. Okay. Trying to zip along here. Okay, my friend, almost done. It's usually about this time that I get sick of the project already. I'm like, come on. I'm tired of looking at you, mask. Next. Because after sitting for, almost 2 hours, parts get, it's like getting a little antsy. So it's better for you guys if you get up and do things kind of somewhere in the middle. Don't just sit there for 2 hours. Unless, of course, you can do that. Okay, almost done. Almost done. Okay, so almost to the edge. And our probably last 3 stitches, and then we'll seal it off and thread through the ties. And we be done. Almost. And my daughter's probably itching to come down and actually get lunch. She's kind. She doesn't want to interrupt this. Okay. All right. All right, so I'm going to snip that off, and then safety pin into the edge of our friend here, the cord. Now I'm going to go in from the top and pass this through. Hopefully it does not fight me, and it will go through neatly. If you get to this point and you find that your safety pin won't go through, push it back a little bit, take your friend the scissors or even a chopstick and stick that down in, just to kind of separate the material so your safety pin can come up through. Let's see, like so. You can reach in, just grab it. Okay, so we came in through the top. I'm going to unclip. I'm going to take, this is the bottom, just kind of leave it dangling. Take the other one. I'm going to come up to the top again, do the whole safety pin, and take and run it down through the top to the bottom. This will give you a loop on top for easy putting on of the mask. Okay. All right, it's down through, pull it, unhook, and then here we are. We have one mask with the loop at the top and the ties at the bottom. This helps in two ways. Helps you keep it on your head or put it on your head and tie it, but it also shows you which end is the top, because sometimes, you could get confused. Sometimes people do. You don't want to put it on upside down. So here, I'll just demonstrate how this works. Just enough of a loop so that you can put it over your head, like so. And then pull. Adjust where you want that. And there you have it, one mask. Now the strings will vary person to person, the size of your head. So those you're gonna have to adjust yourself. It's err on the side of cutting them too long and you'll be good. So thank you. This was a really long one. Thank you for hanging in there with me. I hope you ladies have a wonderful day.